in terms of these dualities and polarities, these almost limitations of the way we think, we have to put it in this box or go radically to the other side in this other box. You do take that Arthur C. Clarke line and kind of flip it, that line that any advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. You instead say any sufficiently profound magical event is indistinguishable from technology. And then you go on to say that if you take the Kenneth Arnold story that I think most listeners are familiar with and you use that flipped analogy for it, you say that modern technology was not being misperceived by scientifically naive ancients. Ancient souls were being misperceived by spiritually naive moderns. Help us out there. What do you mean by that? How does it help us make more sense of the Kenneth Arnold story?
Well, first of all, let's talk about Ken Arnold. Ken Arnold was the pilot who saw these objects in, I think, June 24th of 1947 or something like that. And I was a journalist who coined the word flying saucer for them the same summer. So Ken Arnold is responsible in some ways for this whole flying saucer story that begins then. But he himself thought that these things were alive. He perceived these things in the sky to be animals, essentially, or souls that come from some other world where we go when we die. And so I think what gets picked up in the culture is that, oh, these are flying saucers, these are spaceships, these are objects, these are technological objects in the sky, when in fact, Arnold perceived them to be living beings that come from the place of the dead. Okay? That's a total flip. Like, what the hell? I mean, and the further you get into the flying saucer thing, the more you realize that it is connected to the world of the dead, and that the technological reading is our reading again, Greg. We are assuming the truth of our technological, scientific, materialist worldview, and then we're reading that back into these encounters with these light forms in the sky, when you can do the opposite, and you can say, well, maybe these are life forms in the sky, but we're misperceiving them as technological objects because of our own worldview. And that's what I'm trying to say. That's how I'm flipping. The Arthur C. Clarke line, by the way, annoys the hell out of me. Every time I hear it, I just want to roll my eyes. And because it assumes that we have it now. We've got the truth. We've got it. It's technology. No,
Yeah.
that's not the truth. That's just our worldview that you are assuming when you read these pre-modern magical events or spiritual events in technological ways.
Mm-hmm. I also think there's something interesting about a lot of the technologies that they have worked on or are working on are kind of replacements for a natural ability to some extent, like a psi effect or something. Like you hear people talking about voice to skull technology that the CIA has. Well, that's a psi effect that maybe if you trained yourself or cultivated that, you could do it without the technology. And I think that might be true for a couple of different things, but our society, we really forget about the natural abilities and we try to find some mechanical replacement for a lot of them.
Yeah, I mean, you've opened a can of worms here. I mean, the truth is that the language for psi abilities tracks very closely the language for technological development. So, for example, telepathy was originally telegraphy, and it was based on the technology of the telegraph, because that was what people in the 19th century had to think about long distance communication, particularly instant communication, or communication that seemed instant. Then it became a radio. Then it was mental radio. Then it was the television. Now it's the computer. Now it's AI. There's always this tracking. It was spiritualism was connected to early photography. I mean, there was always this relationship between technology and what we're calling psi, which leads me to be very, very suspicious of any technological metaphor again.
Mm.
I'm like, look, you thought it was photography, then you thought it was the telegraph, then you thought it was a radio, then you thought it was now you're saying it's a computer. Now, I mean, come on. Why should I believe you, in 2023 when you were totally wrong in 1853 and 1923 and 1993? I mean, you were always wrong.
Yeah.
Just come on. These are metaphors. These are not things. And so I'm just very suspicious, Greg, of this argument that somehow technology is going to replace these things or get us there. I don't think so. I think psi is a function of consciousness, by the way, and of mind. And I don't think mind is reducible to brain or to a
Yeah.
particular technology, be it biological or silicon based. I think that's just naive.
Right. And we'd probably get further by exploring the natural technologies, quote unquote, that the mind has rather than trying to make new ones. I'm already tired of the conversation, will AI become conscious? And it's in its infancy. I'm probably be hearing about that for the next decade, and I'm already sick of it. I
I
just
was
don't
sick of it a
care.
long time ago, Greg. It's a materialist argument,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
what people don't understand, it assumes that mind is produced by the brain. It assumes that because what it's arguing is that if a particular kind of intelligence can be mimicked or recreated in a computer, that intelligence, that the computer can become conscious, that the AI can become conscious because the material base of that is sophisticated enough and subtle enough that just like the brain, it will suddenly become conscious. And I'm like, yeah, well, what if that's not the relationship between mind and brain?
Right, right. But they do
Uh,
say, some other people say, which I think is more accurate, that the mind is a receiver of consciousness. So could someone not build an artificial receiver? What is the prerequisite to receive? Even if consciousness is this river of intelligence out there, what is the prerequisite to
it's
receive it?
possible, I guess. I guess it's technically possible, but I just I don't believe it.
I'm with you. I really don't either. But as it's just interesting from the receiver standpoint, because even if I think about the animist perspective that all things are conscious, rocks, trees, any biological thing is conscious, well, then I sometimes think about animals and I'm like, well, I mean, consciousness, it's kind of assumes like a free will, like you kind of have an awareness and can act as if, yet we have all these people who look at different species of animals and they say, these animals mate for life. And then you look at the sandhill crane, and there's very little exception to that rule. And it almost seems like every animal or species has a program in which it operates within. We see animals mourn other animals, so there is some kind of variance in there, but they do seem to have rule sets, data sets in which they operate. And that's kind of interesting from a matrix perspective or a what is this reality perspective. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that, Greg. I mean, I always invoke meat eating and this. I mean, the truth is animals eat one another too. And what the heck, I mean, how is that? And eating plants doesn't solve much if plants are conscious. I mean, you're
Right.
still eating something that's sentient. And I don't have a moral answer for that. I just am like, well, that's the way it is. That's the cycle of life. Things eat one another, you know?
Well, that's how you know we're in Yaldabaoth's Gnostic prison because it's just consuming itself. um,
Well, you can see why people become Gnostics. Yeah, you
yeah,
can.
yeah.
No.
People start to wonder, like, man, it seems like being out of the body would be better when I have these experiences. They're quite amazing, and my mundane body feels like it just has aches and pains and needs to sleep, and I feel very limited by it. Yeah, you can see how that path goes. But talking about how some of these paranormal experiences or the UFO has to do with death, or the Greys experiences has to do with sexuality and fluids and all this stuff, it does start to make one think about like the wider system, even the meat eating question. Like if we zoom out and talk about the system itself. What is a human life? What is physical reality? Why does consciousness go on this journey? How do you think about things in a way that high strangeness experiences make a little more sense, nested inside the larger frame of what life even is? Yes, we talked about how these experiences jolt a person out of baseline consciousness and make them ponder these things. But what conclusions have you come to about what life even is? Can you believe it, people? A video clip and a peek into how that sweet THC sausage is made. For some people, I'm sure it's nice to put a face to the name, so I started making clips that are a little more YouTube friendly than the full show tends to be. Get the full show on any podcasting platform. I prefer to keep it audio only, so we have a more decentralized distribution for a controversial show, and also so I can edit out the ums and ahs and barking dogs and all the things that happen when a person records in their home environment. And then if you really like the show, you can sign up for THC Plus, and instead of 1 hour interviews, you get the full 2 hour interview for just $8. I think that's a better deal, more of a win-win than asking you to support the show by booking a therapy session or buying generic Viagra. It's getting weird out there, folks. So just go to the highersidechats.com or click the link at the top of any set of show notes, and all your wildest dreams will come true. All right? All right.
The Higherside Chat Show, Kripal, Wood, Company.